Good afternoon, and welcome to the Sustainable Materials Management webinar series, a joint effort between the National Recycling Coalition and the Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center. My name is Wayne Bowen. I'm a program manager for the Recycling Market Center and will serve as your moderator today. Before we get started, I would like to extend a special thanks to Bob Hollis of the Mobius Network for providing the webinar management software for this series. Our focus of today's webinar is data security issues for the recycling of old, outdated IT equipment and e-waste. Our presenters today are Joanne Schaefer and Joe Harford, who I will introduce in a moment. Following the presentations, we will conduct a question and answer session. If you have a question or comment, please use the GoToWebinar dialog box located in the control panel on your screen. You may also use the dialog box to request assistance if you're experiencing technical difficulties during the webinar. Please note that an edited version of this webinar will be made available for viewing via YouTube links on the National Recycling Coalition and PA Recycling Market Center websites. The presentation slides can also be obtained using the handout upload feature on your webinar control panel. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. Due to a schedule conflict, Joanne Schaefer, who is the Deputy Director of the Center County Solid Waste Recycling and Refuse Authority, is not able to make a live presentation. So what you're going to see and hear now is a recording of her description of the events during and after a cybersecurity attack that occurred on her organization last fall. I believe this will be a good lead-in to Joe's presentation. So before I run her recording, let me provide a little background. Center County Solid Waste and Recycling and Refuse Authority provides an integrated waste management reduction and recycling service to a Pennsylvania county with a population of about 163,000 people. Over 25,000 of its residents are served by curbside recycling. They also provide 125 drop-off recycling bins and service over 1,000 commercial establishments. They operate a waste transfer station and a recycled materials recovery facility. And then I believe Joe, following this, is going to provide some follow-up comment to this recording. But if you do have any questions and comments for Joanne, you may follow up with her via email or phone call, and her contact information will be shown on the screen. So let me pull that up and listen. We'll see her presentation.
So on Wednesday, October 8th of last year, our authority, the County Recycling and Refuse Authority, did a cyber attack, and we found that out when we could not open our scales for business at 8 o'clock that morning. So I was still at home. I received a call from our office manager that there was trouble rushed in. Our boss, Ted, was actually on vacation that day, but our office manager had already called him. So initially, to begin to operate, which we did. Tried to shut our scale down, got a hold of our IT person, made sure that we at least could weigh trucks in and out, because that, of course, is the core of our business, particularly on what might be considered by others, but not us, to be a holiday Monday. When we heard back from the IT person who was on his way here from Tyrone, which is about 40 miles away, he suspected that perhaps it was a cyber attack. And one of the things that you're looking at on your screen right now is a ransom note. So I can talk a little bit about how we got to that thought, but let me just touch a little bit on some of the what we are now referring to as the nightmare on Transfer Road, otherwise known as Bitcoin brokers and bad actors. The first thing that came up to us was, why would anyone want to look at the possibility of attacking a relatively small recycling center and transfer station? But we, while we were waiting for our IT guy to get here and so on and so forth, we had to take whatever appropriate action we needed to take. And in our case, that generally starts with calling and alerting our attorney. So I did that as soon as I possibly could. We started to run hand tickets at our scale so that we could keep traffic flowing and keep our business going. And the first thing that we do, besides call the attorney when we have an issue, is to get in touch with Pennsylvania DEP, because to shut down a scale and run hand tickets is a departure from our operational plan. This is where it starts to get a little bit comical. Monday, October 8th was a federal and state holiday. It was Columbus Day. And so I could not reach anyone at our DEP regional office. I had to call the emergency number. They had never been reported this type of emergency before, and weren't really sure what to do. So when in doubt, it was sort of like, okay, well, there's no environmental spill. We'll deal with it tomorrow. The second call, on the advice of our attorney, was to the local FBI office, because cyber crime is a federal crime. This is where it gets even funnier, because, again, October 8th, Monday, was Columbus Day, a federal holiday. So I could not reach anyone at the FBI office. What was even funnier was that the message kept saying, if you are calling to report a cyber crime, please go to this particular website. And I'm screaming into the phone, but you don't understand, I have no internet access. So there, it's still going on, by the way, as we're recording this on the 20th of February. And I'll get into that in a moment. But I can assure everyone that might be listening that while it sounds rather comical at the moment, and we have learned to laugh about certain things, it was not comical at the time that it was happening. So I did leave some messages for the FBI. Our local FBI office was most helpful. We finally did get through to them, but at this point we were kind of on hold, waiting for our IT person to get in, and we also called our insurance company. Luckily, there were some people there that could respond, but first things first, we were operating. The second step is to protect the money. So it was, of course, also, guess what, a bank holiday. However, we have a very good relationship with our bank, and we were able to get someone from the bank. They did actually open one of the branches for us so that we could start to change over I'm sorry, not our, what I'm looking at is looking to look at the other ransom note. So we could start to change our accounts over, because we at this point had absolutely no idea whatsoever that there was going to be, that there, what was happening or what was going on. So first things, open for business. Second thing, protect the money. Third thing is start to peel back what is actually happening and take steps to set priorities. So as the day went on, we did that. I called in with all the present staff. We had some, at this point, advice from our IT guy saying, all right, we can't do this, we can't do that. There are certain things that seem to be okay to use. We were trying to operate from our phones because we had workstations completely shut down. We had guests in our interpretive center. We had to separate them from the internet, and so on and so forth. So, by the way, I did forget to mention that it was not a holiday for local law enforcement, who we also had to let know what was happening. So out of the folks that we tried to get on that Monday, actually local to College Grove Police law enforcement was the most helpful to us. And we've learned learned some things along the way. One of them was that they were very pleased to hear that we did engage an outside IT firm, because their experience had been often when things like this happen, it's a air quotes here, inside job. So they were happy to see that that wasn't the case. So sort of fast forwarding, there were a lot of comical moments, but many of us of a certain age who make fun of people who are constantly attached to their phones certainly came away with a better understanding of why that is. I never guessed as a recycling coordinator that my particular priority on any given day was going to be cybersecurity. So, we moved from sort of the on-site into the emergency room. Again, reset priorities. This was going on for hours and hours and hours and hours. Talked to the insurance company, hoped to get some advice from them. Our IT guy had been through this with another client. So he was able to give us some very good advice, and his first advice was, we're going to need a forensic team. And by the way, I believe this is ransomware, and again, you're looking at some ransom keys on your screen. If you're a programmer, you understand what this means. If you're a recycling coordinator, it might as well be Greek. And that's exactly where we were. You may be asking, why are there two separate ransom notes? I'll get to that in a second. So we engaged very quickly. This is going into the second day. A cybersecurity firm that was based in Washington, D.C. They gave us some triage things to do as far as trying to get to the bottom of what was happening. By this point, we, of course, have had our attorney throughout the situation with us, trying to get us good advice. We did have cybersecurity insurance. However, it was not enough. And we learned that probably by day 2. I'm fast forwarding a bit here, but I'm going to tell you that at this point in time, we still have insurance claims to settle, but we're at $250,000 and counting. One of the triage things that we were told, and I found this an interesting fact, and Joe may be able to address this when Joe speaks, is that we were advised on day 1 and day 2 not to send email around about the situation, because since the attackers had, we believed, access to our system, any chatter about the situation was likely to raise the ransom. So we probably by about hour, I'm going to say maybe hour 3, we had set up a text message, sort of a triage situation that we would be able to talk back and forth to each other without engaging internet. One of the things that we found out, by the way, was that the attackers had hit about 4 p.m. on the Sunday before. At that particular time, another person in my office, myself and our executive director, were all logged in remotely from home. So that complicated things, because it meant that there were possibilities that home computers were also compromised, and Surface Pros, which some of us also had. So we were instructed at that point not even to bring our Surface Pros anywhere near the building because of the propensity to be able to hook on remotely, even though we thought we were secure. So it's going on. I know when I talked with Wayne this morning, we were sort of joking around. At this point, I went back and I checked. To date, I have 682 emails and 744 47 text messages just dealing with this situation. So it's been ongoing. Our servers were wiped out. We had to scrub all of the data. Those of you who are in solid waste or recycling, to the extent that we are, may use the same scale program that we do. We did have backups, but because there were 2 attackers, they got all of the servers, all of our safe data, 20 years worth of scale data and reports, but the second attacker got the backup. So not only were we without our current data, we were also without our backup data. So we started to have to rebuild our data from PC Scale. They had a backup going back to, I believe it was the middle of 2017. So we were going to have to rebuild all of 2017, all of 2018 to date, moving forward, and we started that process. So we had a wonderful, and we have a wonderful crew here. Our scale operator was just amazing because it really does take someone who knows what they're doing to run scale tickets by hand, to make sure that all of the DBP requirements are met for the daily reporting. So a piece of advice actually that I would have for anyone who is dependent on a cyber system of any type, don't forget how to use the paper. And that turned out to be really important. We hadn't forgotten how to use our paper. So we were able to continue operating while this whole, again, we refer to it, the Reclamere transfer road, continues to this day. And Wayne, we didn't talk a lot about how much time, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of fast forward to some of the forensics and talk about how we think this happened and, you know, maybe where we are today. And then if there are questions, maybe we can come back, we can fill in some holes. Does that sound like a plan?
That sounds good.
So we finally did get our forensic report from the cybersecurity firm, and we knew this about towards the end of October. We started to know some of these things, and what we discovered. And by the way, an ex-deputy director of the FBI was the lead person from our cybersecurity firm, which is by the name of Ankura, A-N-K-U-R-A. They were terrific to work with. They really treated us. We felt like we were their only client, even though we know that they aren't. And one of the things that we learned from them was that cyber attacks were up 8,000% in the 12 months previous to this. So if any of you think that your day is quick again, there are steps that you can take. But what we discovered, by the way, was that my computer was, as we now refer to it, patient 0. And that on the 27th of February 2017, I had clicked on a clickbait. And I don't mind sharing this with people. I'm very good at making sure that I'm not clicking on something that is untoward or that could be spam or phishing or so on. But it just so happens that the 26th of February is my daughter's birthday. And I had sent her flowers for her birthday. And on the 27th of February, I got an email masquerading as the U.S. Postal Service saying we were unable to deliver your package to this address on this day. Please click this link to track your package. And because I had, in fact, sent something the day before, I did click on the link which said the package was delivered. And that was the end of that. So this, at that point, the malware was planted. It lay dormant until October 8, 2018, over a year away, and it was sold to two other cyber attackers. So we think they haven't said, and I haven't completely analyzed the report, but we had to send my hard drive, our executive director's hard drive, our education coordinator's hard drive, all to DC to find all of these things out. We were eventually able to scrub all of our servers. We had to soak in additional hardware. When there were midnight conference calls, there were Joanne, please run over and reboot the system at 1 o'clock in the morning while the scrubbers were going on. And as I mentioned, it's still going on today. I just got many of my own files recovered this past Monday. So, financial implications. We had 25,000 in cyber attack and 100,000 in if information was compromised. By the way, we had no reason to believe that any of the actual data was compromised. However, I began to receive scareware emails asking, saying, using the several first letters of a password that I may have used for something via personal banking or authority-related business. And so I spent weeks, months changing passwords, so did everyone here. But because of that, it essentially kicked us into that second category of $100,000 coverage, because we were able to show the FBI that, in fact, we believe that some personal data was compromised. So moving forward, some steps, and I'm sure that Joe, again, will recognize some of this. We do have, as an employer, certain legal requirements. If you believe that any employee's information was compromised, we do not believe that any was, but we believe that there was a possibility so that it could have been. So we have now bought all of our employees a year's worth of identity theft protection. We use the recommendation of the insurance company's attorney of how to set that up for people. Again, that is ongoing. We have recommended to everyone, again, we've retrained everyone that please don't, click on this. I use my own example because, not to embarrass myself, but to show that as a person who is very aware of cybersecurity issues, that you can still very easily get sucked in under certain circumstances. So we chose, by the way, the FBI's recommendation is always not to pay a ransom. We found out through this that there are a lot of people that don't, that this has happened to a lot of people, and they're all advising us to talk about it. And one of the reasons that I am talking about it is because I believe that if we share information, that eventually, we'll get the info to catch a lot of info. There are a lot of them out there. Files and exactly. Well, I can't do these things, but between our IT person, the forensic team, they figured out that between these two ransom notes, it was only about, and I say only in the grand scheme of things, I think one ransom was $1,700, and I believe the other one was $12,000. Our local hospital, we found out later, was hit. The Altoona Hospital, which is about 40 miles from us, was hit. A local municipality was hit. I said to our education coordinator, well, don't worry about all of your files being, all of your graphic files being compromised. You'll eventually get them back. But remember, our printer across the road has everything electronically. At that point, her face went white and her jaw dropped, and she said, I have something I need to tell you. The printer was cyber attacked last week. So our printer was only operating on one computer at that point. Do they think that these situations are related? They actually do not. A local municipality not that far from us was partially hit, as well as our local costs. And these are just things that we know about because we've talked about it. City of Atlanta was completely shut down about a year and a half ago. The FBI is aware of a lot of different operating things. We do believe that the initial malware, to the best of our knowledge, was initiated in Malaysia, and we believe that the two ransomware folks, we believe that one was Vietnamese and the other was Russian. But they can also be one of the largest cyber attacking groups that is very well known, and Sam was his domestic. So, it really comes to how are you going to try to protect yourself, how you can educate your employees, how are you going to recover if something does happen, to have a plan in place. I wouldn't wish this on anyone who needs to go out and pick up recycling on a snowy day, certainly. So keeping in mind that all of the things that I'm talking about in these we have to continue to operate. And I could go on for hours, Wayne, but I don't.
Okay, I think that's the end of Joanne's recording, so we're gonna now switch over to Joe. Okay, Joe, you have the screen now. And while he's doing that, let me introduce Joe. Joe Harford is the president and founder of Reclamere, Inc., an NAID AAA certified IT asset management company, which is located in Tyrone, Pennsylvania. His main objective is to manage the strategic direction of the company and is responsible for the management of all enterprise ITAM program development. He works to ensure small businesses benefit from Reclamere's custom fit big business solutions and maximum security for clients' most valuable assets, their data. Joe brings more than 20 years of experience in various industries and positions to his current leadership role, including excelling in sales for a technology company. He also has a strong background in training and development. Joe has an extensive educational background with both undergraduate and master's degrees in science from Pennsylvania State University, where he's actually earned his PhD in workforce education and development. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe.
Wayne, thank you so much, and I really do appreciate the opportunity to share some of our experiences with everybody today. As I go through my presentation, I want to be able to go back and reference some of the points that Joanne Schaefer had shared, because I think it's really relevant. The first thing I would say is that, cybercrime is about data and money. It's not personal. It's not discriminatory. So, one of her comments was about, why would a recycling coordinator or why would a recycling facility be a target? It's really straightforward. For those of us that are on this call today, in one form or another, we are collecting, managing, storing, transacting vast amounts of data, whether they're about our employees, our customers. It could be about healthcare information. It could be about banking information. But regardless, it's about data. And in the world of cybercrime, data is that 21st century currency. So it's not a personal attack that, hey, I think Wayne is a really bad guy. It's about that Wayne, really without any kind of personality to him, represents some level of data that I have the ability to sell and make money. And that's really all that drives this activity. So when we have those attacks occur, people often sit back and go, why would they attack my facility? Why would I have to deal with this? It's not personal. It really is about money and being able to drive those dollars. Just to give you an idea about Reclamere, and also just a little bit about my presentation style, I'm not gonna read slides to folks. I'm happy to answer any questions as we go through, or wait till the end, whichever you prefer. But Reclamere has been in this business that we call IT asset management and IT asset disposition since 2001, and our business really morphed and changed since its inception. We began working very closely with the Pennsylvania DEP to build our business, really focusing on how do we manage surplus IT assets and what do we do about that. And within about a year of operation, we realized that unless we were going to bring in an incredible volume in tonnage and become a true recycler and processor, that part of the business was going to have to change for us. And so in the middle, toward the end of 2002, we began focusing on what we believed was the additional value add to the model, which was certified data destruction. And that's really what we have built our business on since 2002. So when we take a look at electronics recycling and e-waste, we believe that there are two fundamental components. There is environmental compliance. How are we managing that asset at end of life? And then what are we doing about certified data destruction? And until recently, within the last several years, bodies such as R2 and BAN have not really paid a great deal of attention to the data piece. We're happy to see that they're paying a lot more attention to it than before, but it's still I would say a growing concern within the industry among all of the professionals that are out there. When we talk about managing surplus IT equipment, what I mean by that is we work with organizations in healthcare, financial services, and education, even in government, and we provide those solutions across the United States. Recently, within the last 3 years, we've developed a rolling cart program where what we can do for clients is actually ship a lockable, serialized rolling cart to their facility. They load it up with their electronic assets, they lock that cart, and then it's shipped back to Reclamere for processing. We do that because we want the client to begin managing the chain of custody at their facility. Because we know from experience that when electronic assets build up in a warehouse or in a hallway or in a closet or what have you, they tend to not only grow in number, but they also grow legs and they walk away. And so we've seen laptops and desktop computers with onboard hard drives disappear in the night, and actually data is disappearing as well on those assets. And so by locking those assets up in a secure rolling container, we're allowing the customer to start controlling that chain of custody immediately at their facility. And so from a liability perspective, when we talk about insurance and how are we managing risk, how are we moving that risk, that secure container helps a customer not only maintain that chain of custody, but really to build a very robust and proper method for controlling data. Cybersecurity programs, we're going to talk a little bit more about those as we go through the presentation today, but really what it's about is we work with clients to assess the risk associated with electronic assets and digital data. After we assess that risk, we build remediation strategy plans for them. What to do next? If you don't have an electronics recycling program today, how do we build it? How do we improve it? How do we manage it ongoing? And then finally, when we talk about those remediation strategies, how do we build programs that are ongoing? So they are not simply checking a box and we're done and we're compliant, but rather really it becomes part of the organizational culture and the practice that each and every day we've got to focus on cybersecurity compliance. And in order to do that, those programs have to be ongoing. They have to become part of the overall organizational fabric, very similar to any other health and safety program that's out there. Often the example that I use, my dad worked for the Gulf Oil Refinery in Philadelphia after World War II, and when he began working there, many of the things that they refined out of the earth were often returned to the Schuylkill River, unfortunately. And until OSHA, Clean Air, and EPA really had horsepower and were able to say to organizations like refineries how it pertained to environmental compliance, organizations really didn't pay attention. And so they had to build health and safety programs and environmental programs into the fabric of the organization. We believe the same thing is true of cybersecurity today in organizations. We are now 50, 60 years later, turning around and saying, what are we going to do about compliance and risk management as it pertains to cybersecurity? So similar to where my dad was after World War II working in a refinery, we now find ourselves with an incredible amount of data and risk that we have to be able to build those programs as well. So SSD stands for a solid state drive and HDD stands for a hard drive. And essentially, I think what you can see here is that this investigation proved that hard drives that are making their way to eBay or any other online commerce platform for that matter aren't necessarily clean and free of data. The report goes, if you were to read the details behind the report, it goes into sharing with you the type of data that's found. So from healthcare information to financial information, online purchasing, etc. That's the information that's left on these drives. And these drives are both from consumers as well as businesses. So where we are is we're still at a place where consumers are wanting to get rid of their electronics on a regular basis. In some cases, they're doing that through county recycling programs. And in other cases, businesses are trying to do the same thing with a much higher volume. And so they're looking to IT asset management companies like Reclamere to manage that for them. Well, the challenge on the consumer side is more often than not, when we take a look at some of the programs that are being offered, those programs don't include any type of certified data destruction service. And so although the equipment is being managed in a way that is environmentally compliant and meets the risk and governance requirements, the challenge becomes, what are they going to do as it pertains to data security? How are they going to make sure that the information that they share for getting ready to file our taxes, folks, we're getting ready to come into that tax time of the year, right? So filing taxes on your home computer, well, when that information is filed and that computer is no longer of value to you and you're getting ready to get rid of it, well, what happens to that hard drive? And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go through the presentation. But those are some of the areas that consumers have to pay attention to. By and large, most commercial organizations have a realization of the challenge. They understand what the problems are, and they may or may not have an in-house program, or perhaps they contract with a company like Reclamere. But consumers are still at a very high level of risk as it pertains to the data that they're transacting on their computers. So, data security, I hear about it all the time. You know, I'm kind of getting tired of hearing about it all the time. Why is it such a big deal? Well, you know, like I mentioned to you before, we today transact an incredible amount of information. In fact, a friend of mine and I were talking about this last weekend. Had an opportunity to watch a movie, the new movie with Ryan Gosling, First Man, and if you recall, you know, going into space and realizing that today, for all of us, the phones that we carry around, be it an iPhone, an Android, etc., we have more power in that phone than they had in the entire command center to launch a rocket with human beings into space and bring them home. So that is growing at an exponential rate, and it's powerful and it's of benefit, but you can see where all of that information is being collected and stored, and then there is the disposition process, and that's what makes part of data security a challenge. How do we dispose of all of that information, especially when we talk about our own home computers for that matter? and making sure that that information is destroyed. It doesn't come back to haunt us in any way, like it did to some extent for Joanne. That's a challenge for us. So now you turn around and say, okay, Joe, what am I supposed to do? Like I've got 2 laptops, I've got an old desktop. What am I supposed to do? The first thing that you've got to be able to do is to understand that destroying data on your hard drive is not as simple as just simply hitting the delete button or dragging something to the recycle bin. Very often there are recycling programs out there for consumers where the service provider will actually offer shredding of your personal hard drive. It may be fee-based or otherwise. I would strongly encourage you, after you've backed up your hard drive, and that was one of the points that Joanne made that I thought was really spot on, and I'll talk about that later on, but backing up that information and making sure that if you have to get to it for whatever reason, you have the ability to do so. But take your personal hard drive and shred it. Take it to a facility and have them shred that drive for you. I think that's an exacting way that really is going to meet your need. The other thing to understand is that the process of electronics recycling is incredibly labor intensive. It also has so many different channels and points of failure. So if I use Reclamere as an example, when we perform electronics recycling and certified data destruction for our customers, they're loading their equipment into those secured rolling containers that I mentioned to you earlier. Those containers are being shipped back to Reclamere, and our employees are going to then take that equipment and they're going to process it. Our main line of business is reuse. That's really what we're trying to do with all of the equipment that we get here. But for that equipment that cannot be reused, it has to be recycled. It stays here in the United States with an R2 certified facility and goes to that facility for shredding and ultimate disposition. But there are many other operators that have so many different opportunities for electronic equipment to be moved around and passed from individual to individual, facility to facility, that opportunity for loss or theft is pretty incredible. So that's another reason why the recycling aspect adds the challenge to how to be secure with consumer data. So I mentioned this just a little bit ago. Making backups of your data, whether you're talking about your own personal information or you're talking about company information, making sure that you're doing everything possible to back that data up, whether you back it up in another physical drive or you back it up to the cloud, those backups are essential. Even more important is then restoring from a backup. And I don't want to get into the technical conversation right now because you can have this conversation with an IT person in your business, or perhaps you've got an IT professional that's a member of your family. But being able to restore from those backups is key, because I can tell you part of our business is data recovery. And we've worked with organizations that they have a very methodical approach to backing up their information daily, weekly, and monthly. And yet, they never tested those data backups to see if they can restore data from that. And then at the time of the incident, when they went to restore the data, that failed. And so ultimately, they had backed up and were never able to recover. So being able to test that backup is incredibly important. I mentioned physically shredding your drive if you're a consumer. I heard a funny story. I've got a few friends of mine that are Pennsylvania state troopers, and often they'll take their kids' hard drives or their own hard drives out to a shooting range and shoot them with a rifle or a handgun. I'm not promoting that. I'm just simply saying that there are some very unique ways out there that people handle these things, right? And then obviously being able to work with reputable firms. We have a number of them here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And I'm sure if you're looking for a resource, you can reach out to Wayne and he'll be happy to direct you. But again, really, it's about that hard drive in many cases has enough information on it that if you were to print out all of the documents that are on that one hard drive, you could fill enough bankers boxes to almost fill an entire tractor trailer load with bankers boxes. That's the reality of the power of storage that we have. And storage today, digital storage, is so incredibly inexpensive that that's what people do. And so whether it's backing up your data, shredding your hard drives, working with firms like Reclamere, what have you, that's really what you have to start to do as a consumer, to think about before I get rid of this computer, because we just came out of the holiday season. You may have gotten a new laptop. You've got an old laptop. What do I do? Make sure your data is backed up. You're getting ready to go into tax season, and so you're going to be filing your own individual taxes. So make sure that that's backed up before you get rid of that computer. So those are some of the things that I just want you to be thinking about as you take a look at these challenges. Another thing that I think is important is the industry itself, and how do we deal with credentialing. So I'm sure you're all well aware of, we have BANI stewards, and we have the R2 standard out there on the electronics recycling side. And we have, Reclamere has partnered with R2 facilities. We were, up until last year, we were R2 certified ourselves. And we discontinued that certification because we made a business decision that our processing was so limited that the reality for us was that we could more easily manage downstream by going through an R2 certified facility, and so that's what we do today. But on the data side, we belong to something called the National Association for Information Destruction, and I won't read it to you, but that really is our international trade association that specifically is geared toward data destruction. And how do we certify that data on hard drives has in fact been destroyed? Reclamere is one of the very few IT asset management companies in the United States that can guarantee that the data that we receive from our clients has in fact been destroyed at 100%. And we do that through our quality control process. And I'm not going to bore you with the technicalities of it, but it really is a major differentiator for us when we take a look at being a service provider. The NAID AAA certification is the certification that we hold from NAID for data destruction. And in fact, we were one of the very first electronics recyclers to become a member of NAID. Our current CEO, Angie Singer-Keating, worked to build the NAID AAA certification process and credentialing for hard drive destruction and sanitization. In addition to that, we also hold an industry standard insurance related to downstream data liability, which allows us to provide $5 million in coverage to our clients, so that if we were to either lose a hard drive or to wrongfully use a hard drive, that those two exclusions that are normally part of cyber liability insurance, those two exclusions would in fact be covered. So that's another point of differentiation for us. But as a consumer, when you get ready to look for those partners for the destruction of your hard drives, you want to be looking for NAID AAA certified companies, not NAID members, but NAID AAA certified companies. As well as if you're looking for an IT asset management company from the business to work with, you're going to want to look for this type of credentialing as well. It's really important. Not only does someone meet the environmental compliance requirements for you, but obviously do they meet the data security requirements as well? What I want to do now is I want to dive a little bit deeper into what Joanne experienced, what some of you may have experienced as well, and really talk about this whole world of cybercrime and cyber issue, and what do we do to really put ourselves into a much better position. So I think one of the things that's most important about this slide is the fact that it's not that difficult for a cyber incident to occur. What Joanne described to you in regard to the type of phishing email that she received is a common strategy that is used time and time again by cyber criminals. And what you will find today is that if you think about it, 5 or 10 years ago, you used to get emails where they had really bad grammar and their spelling was awful and the FedEx logo was really fuzzy. But when you look at them today, I think they've turned on spell check and Grammarly, and the content is powerful. The logos are clean and they look legitimate. And it has become increasingly more difficult for us to really make sure that what's coming into our inbox is legitimate. And it's a challenge as organizations get larger, as organizations are again looking at bringing on more customers and more employees. We just continue to really take a look at our weakest link still remains people. And that's not meant to be disparaging. That's just the reality that we are, with the greatest technology, hardware or software, et cetera, the reality is the keyboard doesn't operate itself. It's operated by the folks that sit behind it. And so, that ongoing training, and we'll talk a little bit about process in a little bit, but it's that ongoing training that is so crucial for us today to really be able to hone in on where are the weakest links, what are the things that we need to reinforce with our employees, what are the things that we need to be reinforcing at home. I mean, look at your own home email accounts and the amount of traffic that comes there, the amount of spam that you're getting, and the links that you can be getting there that you could be clicking on, or for that matter, your kids could be clicking on. So those are some of the things to be thinking about. So phishing and spear phishing. Phishing is a very broad email campaign, and spear phishing is very, very specific to you, the end user. And it's all about being able to get information from you where you click on a link and we're able to download an executable file to your computer. That's what happened with Joanne. And she talked about it just sitting there in hibernation or sitting there until something triggered the event. And so that's the other thing. Just because you click on a link today does not necessarily mean that something's going to happen to you today. In fact, in most cases, in most investigations that are undertaken, we find that the ransomware got into the environment weeks, if not months, before the attack actually occurred. And so it just sits and waits for a trigger event to go off. And then all of a sudden, as Joanne would explain to you, a ransom note comes through, files are encrypted, and now all of a sudden we're in a situation where like, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do, and how am I going to get my data back? End user training is one of the most important things that you can be considering in 2019. There'll be a number of other items we'll talk about, but that's crucial. The other thing that's crucial is what's happening at home. Making sure that if your children have their own computers, that you're doing a regular check of where are they going, what are they doing, what are they clicking on. If you have your own home laptop or your own work laptop in your home environment, what is that work laptop exposed to? And then what is your work laptop exposing to your own home environment? Most folks today are incredibly connected, whether it's through your television or your laptop or your Surface or your phone or what have you. We talk about patching systems and antivirus. I cannot express to you more seriously how important those types of things are. Antivirus being up to date, antivirus being turned on, antivirus being used is incredibly important. I would say a deep dive into that also is two-factor authentication. It's a little bit more technical than this presentation. I would just simply say that two-factor authentication is something that you should be talking with IT professionals about, and how to use two-factor authentication can really save you an incredible amount of aggravation and hassle. Some of this Joanne already shared with you, but the proof of life, we had a client a couple of years ago. They were a doctor's office, and essentially what happened is the billing group had left at lunch. When they came back, they had the blue screen which was a ransom note, and they asked for proof of life. The attacker was able to carve out a section of the billing data, share that back to the doctor's office to prove that, yes, we have your data. They asked for $10,000. They decided to pay the ransom to get the encryption key back, and then a few weeks later they were attacked again. So, I think Joanne brought up a really good comment about the advice that people get as it pertains to paying the ransom. Rewind the tape. The most important thing that you can be doing one of the most important things that you can be doing is making sure that your backups are being done and that you can restore from those backups. That is incredibly important. And if you'll notice in the fourth bullet, we talk about government being some of those organizations that are targeted, because cyber criminals realize that whether it's municipal, county, state, federal government, there's an incredible amount of data, especially this time of year with taxes that are being collected and information that's being shared that makes them a really great target. These are just some of the things that can happen from a ransomware attack. In Joanne's particular case, it had to do with the scales at the recycling center. But the place that we really have to start to go, and we have to start to talk about after backup, is we need to know what we don't know, and talk a little bit about that. And what I mean is we really have to understand our particular environment as it relates to risk and what is at risk in our environment, be it computers, our servers, our cell phones, what have you, the current practices that we have. One of the things that we do during risk assessments is we just simply walk around offices, and you would be amazed today how many people still put all of their passwords onto a piece of paper and tape it to their monitor or underneath their keyboard. It's just unbelievable that it still goes on. I understand it, and as a security professional, having multiple passwords is a challenge. I'm not going to say that it's not. It is. There are tools out there that can help you manage multiple passwords. But the reality is that practice creates a great deal of vulnerability for organizations, and that is often one of the top areas that we find in performing a risk assessment. These are some of the reasons why ransomware becomes such an issue, and what I would talk about primarily on this slide, lack of user security training. I would say if we take a look at 10 organizations today, 5 of them are doing something as it pertains to end user security training around cybercrime. They're doing something that's not necessarily structured. The other 5 are doing nothing. And that, like I mentioned earlier, individuals still remain our weakest link. The other thing that's a real challenge too that we find in the organization is the fact that there may be security systems that have been put in place, they've been purchased, but they haven't been implemented correctly. They haven't been set up and configured correctly. And so sometimes that's because either there isn't enough IT expertise in the organization, IT folks change in the organization, what have you. But those 2 areas are definitely a challenge for folks when we're trying to figure out how are we going to combat this problem. Just a common area of failure that we find throughout healthcare, financial services, education, small, medium, and large, it doesn't matter. These are the areas that come up time and time again. As Wayne mentioned, I was very fortunate this time last week to defend for my dissertation and receive my doctorate from Penn State. So now I'm in the process of completing some paperwork. Long story short, I have to fill out a form to get my cap and gown and my hood for graduation in May. Well, I get the form, and it asks for me for my credit card information, etc. And I went back to the service provider and I said, there's no online form for me to complete this. And I was told, well, just scan it and email it to me. Well, that email is going to be unprotected, unencrypted, and basically open to the world when I press send and it goes across the wire. So that whole idea of having information transacting just simply through email communication, dates of birth, social security numbers, healthcare information, etc., that open source is really a major challenge for organizations. And so I worked out the details. I didn't share my credit card information, etc. I'm still going to graduate. But the reality is that those practices still go on today. And you really, as a consumer or as a business person, you have to challenge those because that's a faulty process on the service provider's part. So what are some of the things that I really want you to think about and take from Joanne's experience and some of the information that I've shared with you today? So first and foremost, I think that she did a great job of outlining a very general incident response plan, or an IRP, as we would call it in the industry, when she started talking about notifying the attorney, contacting DEP, the FBI, etc., and really beginning to change their email communication strategy, whether or not employee information was compromised. That was a very a good approach to a basic IRP. But before we have an incident response plan, I would really encourage everyone on the call today to figure out, how do you go about assessing the risk in your environment today? I encourage people all of the time to at least sit down and have a conversation about risk management. This is no different than any other form of risk in the organization. It could be the risk associated with the manufacturing environment. It could be financial risk associated with fraud. It could be medical risk associated with malpractice, etc. This risk associated with cyber crime is no different, and it needs to be assessed. We need to know in your organization today, where are the areas where you have the most exposure? What are the gaps? And then from there, what we need to do is we need to take a look at, how do we build a risk remediation strategy and plan to combat those gaps, to bridge them, to improve the overall risk posture. And then how do we make sure that the organization adopts this as an ongoing program and not just simply something that's going to be one and done, because we don't want this to just simply be a checkbox. Very often, what I will share with you is that from a risk assessment of the organization, from that, organizations will normally take a look at security awareness training, they will take a look at incident response plans, and they will take a look at vendor management programs, because there are third-party vendors that are managing data on your behalf that are putting you at risk because their own IT security practices are either non-existent or negligent. And so they're putting you at risk by the data that they're managing on your behalf in a not so secure manner. Some other things to think about when we talk about what happens or what should we be looking at in 2019. Knowing, as part of the overall risk assessment, what IT assets do you have? Because those IT assets have digital data on them. Where are they? Are they still in service? Are they part of a recycling program? Do we run an employee sale? What are we doing about the assets? What are we doing about the data that resides on those assets, etc.? So really, the world of cybercrime is unfortunately alive and well. It is only going to become more complicated because there's a lot at stake in regard to the information you have is incredibly valuable. And we're only going to continue to collect more and more data as time goes on. So the time for really just sitting down and having a basic conversation about risk as it pertains to your organization or even your home, and how you are collecting, storing, transacting, and managing data is incredibly important. Risk assessments are a very first step in an ongoing program to build risk awareness and to really be able to build a posture for the organization that is robust and it's sustainable and it's defensible, because that's really what we want to do. We want to make sure that our clients are not being sued in a class action lawsuit as it pertains to a data breach. And the days of, if you remember, the days of slips and falls being big money for litigators in the United States, we're now seeing the same thing change, where data breaches and class action lawsuits are going to become that next big litigation target that organizations, small, medium, and large, private or public, government, education, healthcare, et cetera, are going to have to pay attention to. So now, Wayne, if you'd like, I'm happy to answer any questions that the group may have.
Okay, Joe, thank you for that great presentation. So we're now going to field some questions for Joe. Again, if you have a question, please use the GoToWebinar dialog box. We don't have any at the moment, so I guess that means you've done a great presentation and you answered all their questions. But I think I did have a question, and this came from our conversation with Joanne, and I get a chance to follow up with her. You know, she said, you know, the ransom was like $1,700 and $12,000 from each cyber attacker, and that didn't seem like a relatively large amount. So my question was, you know, why didn't they just pay that and not worry about the, you know, the $250,000 that they had to pay, you know, to address it? But I guess, you know, you answered the question. I believe that you know, that could come back on you again and again, I guess, is what I guess the response would be. So if you want to comment on that, that'd be great.
So our advice to organizations is, before we even talk about paying the ransom, we want you to go ahead and test your backups. If you test your backups and your backups fail, then you've got to make a business decision. Are you able to recreate the data that's in question? If you're not able to recreate the data that's in question and you don't have robust backups, the next line of questioning is, okay, if you're going to pay the ransom, we have to make sure that your entire network is clean and safe, so that when you pay the ransom, we know that the intruder can't get back in again. And that's a very complex, coordinated, and costly effort to do. So it's almost as if you've got to make sure that you're opening and closing the door of your house at the right time to get the criminal out while you're handing him cash and then locking the front door. And you know, that may seem like a kind of a silly example, but that's probably the best thing that I can share with you. I would, as a follow-up, just simply say that the best way to circumvent a cyber attack today is by performing a risk assessment of the organization, because I believe that by doing that, you're going to find out those things that are most vulnerable in the organization, those things that are lacking, et cetera, that you can now build a program around to address and hopefully bypass. You're never going to be 100% secure unless you turn off your computers and go home. That's the reality of where we are. But our job is to make sure that we can help you defend your position around IT security, and to make sure that if there is a security incident, that we minimize the damages to the organization as well as those parties that are affected.
How would you answer that question on a personal level if that happened, you know, to you personally? I mean, let's just say the ransom was $200, which really, you know, most people could afford that, but they don't have the resources to basically recreate everything. You know, they don't have the proper backups and so forth.
You know, it's a personal decision, right? So I mean, depending upon what it is that they have you know, that they have encrypted from you, if it's something that is really life-changing or family centric, then you're going to have to make the decision as to whether or not you want to, you know, you want to pay that ransom. You know, for myself, it's always been about backing up, making sure that, you know, we've got antivirus on all of our devices, making sure that, you know, our wireless router at home is locked down and secured. I can't tell you, Wayne, the number of times that I drive through communities today with a wireless laptop and still find at-home networks that are wide open with no lock on them at all.
Right.
It is amazing to me.
Yep. Okay, here's a question. Do you have any thoughts on utilizing blockchain management for chain of custody tracking?
You know, I'm not an expert in blockchain. I will say that it is an area that's getting a great deal of attention, and not just you know, in government, but in healthcare and in financial services. But I don't feel confident enough to be able to comment on it any further. I would just simply say that there are an incredible amount of resources out there, and if someone wants to shoot me an email, I'm happy to make that connection to those resources.
Okay. Does your computer have to be on to be vulnerable or hacked? If it's turned off, it can't be hacked?
So the way in which you get hacked is when you click on something. So if your computer is on and you don't have any applications open and you don't have the internet connected to it, etc., and you're not clicking on email, you're not clicking on links, there's really nothing that's going to happen to you. The way in which someone is able to get to you is when you actively click on a particular link, go to a particular website, but something has to be executed on your computer in order for you to be vulnerable.
Okay. And then going back on the question, does the computer have to be, she said that the computer she referring to was hooked to a network. If it's hooked to a network, and if it's on or off, is that an issue?
Being hooked to a network just simply means that they have a gateway out to the internet. So again, what it comes down to is, in order for that computer to be vulnerable, the end user is going to have to click on something, whether it's an attachment or a link in an email, etc. But the end user has to create a transaction through the keyboard in order for that vulnerability to become executed.
Okay. Is there any security software that you could recommend?
You know, there are all types of antivirus that are out there today. You know, you've got some that are specific for mobile devices, such as phones and Surface Pros. You've got some that are specific to desktops. Some that, in most cases, when you buy your home computer, it's probably going to come with a free subscription to either a Norton antivirus or a Tech Micro, etc. So there's any number of software applications and tools out there today that somebody could use.
Okay, how do you argue against forces looking to enact a shred all policy versus attempting to persuade leadership to rely on wiping hard drives clean, which would enable reuse?
So right now today, there is no documented case where a hard drive that has been taken and has been taken through a NAID AAA certified process for hard drive erasure / sanitization of data being recovered from that drive. So with that said, the argument is really about being able to preserve the asset so that we can help a client offset the cost of the recycling program and data destruction service. That's really what we're trying to do. And until there is a documented case where a properly sanitized hard drive has had data recovered from it, we feel very comfortable in what it is that we provide to our customers. The other thing that you have to realize too is that our process at Reclamere guarantees, because let's say that I remove 100 hard drives from someone on this call's organization and I provide certified data destruction services. Those same 100 hard drives will go through a quality assurance check where we use data recovery and computer forensics tools to try to recover data back. And if by chance data were to exist on that drive, the default mechanism at Reclamere is to physically shred that drive. So there's a two-step verification process that we use to make sure that the data has in fact been destroyed. And so when you're looking for that service provider, you've got to make sure that that kind of quality control is in place.
Okay, great. So I think we're out of time here for this webinar, so we're going to close it up. Again, this webinar, like all the webinars in this series, has been recorded and will be made available via YouTube links on both the National Recycling Coalition and Recycling Market Center websites. Thank you for the audience for participating and those great questions. And thank you, Joe, for taking the time out to make this presentation. So we hope you'll join us for next month's webinar. Please visit the NRC and RMC websites for scheduled updates. And have a great day, everybody.
Wayne, thanks so much.